And we're live.
No one there, you don't talk like that.
And we're live.
Yeah, we have to get a different way. There's nothing wrong with my fellow kid, Jimmy Rick. That's what I'm going to do. Is it going to do?
Yeah, well, it's picking me up. Is it picking you
People
up?
could pick me up the other side of the city, big booby cunt.
And we're live. Coming to you live from the MGM Arena in Florida, Massachusetts.
Massachusetts?
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's 4 people online. If you could let us know if you can see us and hear us, okay, that would be great. Oh, yeah, Patrick Miller is online. Perfect. And Jackson says he can hear us and see us.
I'm glad you're not in tomorrow. There we go. It was much easier than I thought it would be.
Oh, that's ideal. That's very useful.
That was so useful.
Oh, we should have done the live stream through Zoom.
Something like that, but it doesn't matter.
We could do it there. We don't have any questions, do we?
No, so I think. Jesus Christ. Like the bounty guy. Who's the bounty guy? Bounty bars with coconut in them. These are the worst.
Bounties are the worst chocolate bar.
They're easily the worst thing in the world. They're genuinely. Yeah, the 109 final is pretty good. I see Joey has put he literally just put up a video of him doing 239 in his story. He's a big lad.
Yeah.
He's a big lad. 239 kilos clean and jerk. Fast and meat schwer.
Lovely clean.
Yeah, some jerk for a man with the arms and the length of him. Wow. Yeah. He put up his story, 239. Whew. Deserving Olympic champion. It's mad that Simon Marstonian doesn't have the gold medal yet, though.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Because he's come hard and come for a long time.
After just under a year of training, I did a 130 snatch and I've started to slow down in progress. I'm 109, and what curious what my ceiling would be. Absolutely, with no idea what your ceiling could be. This question is:
how long is a piece of string?
One guy, someone commented on my Instagram and said he's a 15-year-old from Azerbaijan, and he'd just been lifting for 2 months, and he said, "Do you think I could be a world champion?" What was I supposed to say?
Yeah.
So we've actually no idea. Your ceiling could be anything. Your ceiling could be 2 more kilos. You might never progress beyond that, or your ceiling could be another 40 kilos. Like this, literally could be. You know, your ceiling could be anything. So there's no idea what your ceiling could be. My answer to this all the time now is train for 10 years, come back, and then I'll tell you what your ceiling was.
Yeah. The other thing is like the very last thing you should be concerned with is where your ceiling is. Like slowing down will just happen, particularly if you've hit 130 within a year. Slowing down is obviously going to happen, and it will happen on a much sharper slope than what a lot of other people would have. But literally, the ceiling is the last thing. Like the ceiling of the only time you should think about the ceiling you have on your natural potential would be when you're lying on your deathbed, being like, "Yes, I think that was the full limit of my potential." That's hilarious.
Brawny. Patrick, are you Irish? I don't ever see the paper towels man. I know what Bounty is, but I didn't know there was a man.
Neither did I.
Thanks, lads. I exactly appreciate the shirt, See,
Um,
if I'm wearing a shirt, it means I didn't train in the morning, because there's no way I'd train in the morning and then put on a shirt after training.
absolutely
Go
no
training
way.
then later in the day.
Yeah,
I'm not some kind of psychopath.
no way.
Funny story about psychopaths. Saw there yesterday in the gym. For some reason, the gym in the city, this gentleman came in after his workout,
Into the change room.
proceeded to go for a shower, comes back out in the same underpants. It was really colourful underpants, kind of below us, right? And then proceeds to dry himself exclusively with the hairdryer, right?
No doubt.
While staring himself in the mirror. Full eye contact, staring himself in the mirror, drying himself with the hairdryer. What kind? I realise it's fine. I realise the practicalities work out the same. You dry at the end of it.
Yeah.
But my God, what kind of psychopath does that?
Yeah.
What kind of psychopath does that?
Fake Natty asked why was there never an initiative to establish a new weightlifting fed that would compete with the IWF, maybe one without doping tests. There are tons of. I actually have a few. There's a few things on this, right? So when you look at powerlifting, there's a number of different stipulations around the rules. So like whether the squat is two parallel, whether they're allowed to wear knee sleeves or not allowed, whether they're allowed to wear wraps, a suit, a single ply suit, a double ply suit, whether it's fully geared, whether it's tested, whether it's not tested. Weightlifting is a much kind of purer sport. The snatch and the clean and jerk, there's no deviation in rules that you could realistically say, I'm going to go to a different fed because they'll leave me press out on the jerk, or I'm going to be able to rebend and use the oscillation of the bar on the jerk, or something along those lines. So the rules are way clearer. So there's no need to have a separate fed. The other thing is people want to test themselves. Like, so people who are into weightlifting want to test themselves on the major stages. Like the thing of recreational weightlifting is really a very, very recent thing in terms of being a popular sport. Like weightlifting was to win medals up until about 20 years ago, and then it started being this recreational sport that people would kind of do on the side in a semi-popular setting. Like normal people wouldn't have looked at the snatch or clean and jerk in a normal gym environment. We just so happen to have much more gyms now where that's possible to do. So I think that's the other reason, is that most of the time it was full-time or professional athletes competing, and they wanted to compete on the IWF stage because that's where things matter most. I'd say it's very likely something like this could pop up in the future, but I don't think it would ever have the gravitas that the IWF will have. And then the last thing is John North tried to set up a weightlifting federation in the US, and it tanked. Like, it tanked really bad. People want to see big lifts in weightlifting competitions. Nobody wants to see shitty lifts. And if you want to see the biggest lifts, you have to have the best lifters, and the best lifters all lifting for the IWF. It's just how it is.
So that's the main thing, really, is that there is a central focus point for everything to lift towards in weightlifting, like, so they can go and compete in the IWF and do those competitions, and everyone knows that that's the best one. Nothing even comes close to it because there's nothing else, So whereas a powerlifting, no one has really. So the IWF is slowly pulling away from the rest of them in terms of like legitimacy, but again, it's drug tested, so it's kind of a different scenario because the IPF, or sorry, even just powerlifting in general, doesn't have a really essentially established kind of place where everyone will go to. Also, weightlifting, because most Olympic weightlifters at Olympics are funded by their national governing bodies, and they would only fund them via results in real competitions in legitimate federation at the Olympics, so they wouldn't get funded otherwise. So the main thing is being in the Olympics is the big thing for weightlifting. However, contrary to popular belief, I think weightlifting would do very, very, very well outside of Olympics. It would change a bit. The Olympics would become less of the focus. There would definitely be more drugs taken and bigger lifts. Yeah. But I think weightlifting would do fine at the Olympics. I think we're worried. It would be a different.
I think
scenario.
It's hard to see because at the moment we don't have like a Bundesliga here, like, or an equivalent, where you have good lifters lifting in leagues and they're regularly competing, and you see big lifts. At the moment, we just live for world championships. And
the world championships are there.
I know, but I'm saying at the moment, we're not used to this thing of like it being privatized competitions. Mm-hmm. We're still living for international lifts. Like.
Yeah, maybe we do need to kick out Olympics. Maybe we're good for weightlifting.
Maybe we do. Maybe it would be bad for powerlifting if they get into Olympics.
No, let's do it now.
Do you have any recommendations for wrist strengthening exercises? I have one.
So you can do the thing with wrist strengthening stuff is isometrics work very, very well for it, because if you're specifically looking for some of the little things inside your wrist, there's so many small bones and tendons, the ligaments in your wrists, that were you to look for something focused around here, in general, what it looks like is if you were to go with curling action, so extension or flexion or whatever, you're primarily getting further up the chain. Whereas if you're using isometrics with a straight wrist position or in a flex or extended wrist position, you're more likely to target smaller areas in the wrist with the tendon or ligament issue would be my main thing with this. I don't think wrist curls, for example, if that's the go-to thing you do, would get everything you need, I think, in terms of wrist pain. Because no one ever trains their forearms because they want to train their forearms. People are only training forearms because their wrists are sore.
You never proactively train the forearm. What my piece on this is, people who look to train their wrists or get their wrists stronger, most of the time, if you're a strength sport athlete, it's because you've shit overhead positions. People who think you should hold a barbell like this overhead, so the kicked back wrist position, are wrong. That's wrong. It doesn't matter what they've done. Doesn't matter what they tell you about this is right. People do it because it sneaks them an extra inch or half inch on the height of the bar, but it's wrong. And if you're having to train your wrist, it's very likely due to that bad wrist position you're having to train it. So if you kept a stacked wrist overhead, you probably wouldn't have to do that.
So a lot of times we do see some people talk about that wrist flex position or wrist back position. So it's funny in powerlifting, though, we don't ever see people, a lot of people in benching realize, or a lot of the better people realize that a straighter wrist position is a more powerful one, you know, and it realistically is very, very similar in the overhead position. Snatching team, just take Nick isn't the weightlifter. We don't know that.
Yeah.
So Lewis Grice, how would you go about setting up a season strength initiative? That's your question. For an amateur rugby player, Tuesday and Thursday on pitch, match on most Sundays. Thanks, boys.
You do a needs analysis first. Are you too weak? Are you too fast? Or sorry, not fast enough? Are you not powerful enough? Where do you tend to lose out? Do you not have good enough work capacity? Once you initially assess that, you will hope that you've been working on those deficits in the off season. When you go into in-season rugby, right? So assuming you're going into that transition now in the next 4 to 6 weeks, going from a pre-season block to an in-season block, hopefully you are coming in with the highest 1RMs you've ever had in your entire life and a pretty good aerobic base, right? Highest 1RMs because you're not going to get stronger during the season unless you're playing at a relatively low level and your pitch sessions don't take much out of you, or you've never done strength training. Most of the time, your 1RM numbers just decay slowly throughout the season. What you do to maintain those is you do pretty heavy 5s, 3s, 2s, and 1s throughout the season. You tend to cycle through them in that order, and then you make sure you're squatting once a week and you do some sort of pull once a week. In terms of the overall progression, you're not going to be able to maintain much. So it's like 2 to 3 heavy enough sets of anything, hoping that you can get up around 80 to 90% of 1RM or 5RM, depending what you're doing, and hit those relatively consistently. You're just trying to hold on to numbers. How you would space that out, if you had a game last Sunday and you have a pitch training Tuesdays and Thursdays, if you have a game on Sunday, you take Monday off. Don't do active recovery. Don't do anything else. If you have things that are injured, you ice them. If you have things that are really, really tight, you might stretch them or get some tissue work done. You do your pitch session Tuesday. You do a gym session Wednesday, pitch session Thursday, and you might do a gym session Thursday after that, or you can do gym session Friday. Your gym session on Friday won't be as heavy as your gym session on the Wednesday, and then you have a day off or a captain's run on Saturday, and then you have a game on Sunday. Your overall sessions, what they're going to look like, usually your sessions will be 45 to 60 minutes long. They're going to be very condensed. When you get into the gym, you'll usually do 5 to 10 minutes of aerobic work, making sure you're very warm, making sure you're out of breath, because the last thing you need or the last thing you want to do is get injured doing a gym session or tweak something doing a gym session. The only time you should get injured is when you're actually playing rugby. So get into the gym. A good comprehensive warm-up should take no longer than 10 minutes. Once you're done that, you will do some sort of fairly high skill, fairly high speed movement. That might be a power clean, that might be a hang power clean, that might be a push press, or it might be a fast and heavy squat. Then you'll do your main strength exercise, depending on what your needs analysis shows up. That might be a squat, that might be a deadlift, that might be bench pressing, that might be some contribute or some combination of all of those. Then you will do your prehab and your accessory exercises. Most of the time, that's going to be fairly heavy single arm and single leg work. And then you finish up. If your session goes on more than an hour, you just finish your session and don't do any more than that. Everything you do in season is either prehab work or else maintenance work to hold on to what you gain in the off season.
Is there room for curls in there?
Curls every day.
There's never really a point where curls would be negative anyway. So I mean,
no. Oh my God, for rugby, slot curls. So thumbs over the top of the bar.
Nobody else calls them this, by the way.
This.
It makes sense.
This is what you want.
But no one calls them that.
Because you need that bind, like a broken wrist bind is what you need to be very strong.
What was in Dr. G's bag on? So it was either painkillers, fructose, test suspension, or sustanon. And we'll never know.
We'll never
know. Electric throws. Hi guys. Other than bullying me on the podcast, did you actually look at it with me? We actually haven't. To be honest, we've been to up the walls, and I've been saying this recently.
Yeah.
I've only recently, so very frequently, I would always be reading newer research, different books, looking at different programming. And honestly, the last 3 months since moving to the office, neither of us had much of a chance to read new things, which is a shame. So again, at the weekend, I've started doing a little bit more again because of especially in the good weather and stuff. You just don't want to be reading papers and stuff. But recently, again,
we still have your post-it note. There we go. Thunder Chuck training transfer. It's still there.
So we're going to start doing the paper reviews again every week because we had a nice break from them. We both kind of have a grow to do it again. It's something we really enjoy doing because it was useful for us to give out information, but it was also useful for us to just find out new things and keep on top of the new S&C research. So the short answer is no. Long answer is eventually we'll get around to it, but right now we haven't done. Alex is doing a lot of editing for us. We'll have more time to do other things and a bit more time to upskill again. We'll stay on top of it.
Tyrone McCabe asks, lads, any advice on longevity in rugby? Specifically, what kind of thing can I do in the gym to play as long as I can? Longevity is, so in amateur rugby, right, people get this, there's a misnomer, right, where people start doing things like doing triathlons, start running 10Ks, they start losing a lot of tissue, and they start getting very, 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 very lean and fit, which obviously is great, right? So a rugby player getting to his mid to late 30s, possibly even, they start slimming down, their frame becomes slighter, they're slimming down and losing muscle tissue purely due to metabolic factors. They're getting older, so the muscle tissue is coming off them. They're not able to maintain it. They're not able to gain it in the same way they were. But then they start bringing this training stimulus in of loads of aerobic work, right? That, in my opinion, is the worst thing you can possibly do. What you need to do is you need to be lean, obviously, so you have proactive hormone levels that are going to be good for you, right? So the last thing you want to be is fluffy and fat. You don't want high estrogen levels. We want just a nice, well-maintained physique, which will allow you to play rugby and allow you to recover well, right? So you want to sit, first thing I would say, you want to sit somewhere around 15% body fat. That will be good for you. The next thing you need to do then is be actually strong. So it's not about doing a single leg RDL with 50 kilos, but making sure everything is perfect. It's not about doing being able to do a pistol squat. It's not about being able to do a what do they call the thing where you lie on the floor and get up? A Turkish get up. It's not about any of that. That's all a few places down the line. It's about being actually strong. It's about back squatting 200 kilos. It's about deadlifting 200 kilos. It's about bench pressing 140 kilos. So number one is being in good shape. Number two is being actually strong. Not in comparison to your body weight, not in comparison to other people, being actually strong. It's not doing it without knee wraps or knee sleeves. You just have to do the weight. That's number one thing. If you're getting on a small, but later in life, you have to be actually strong. Then all the other things. I think number three would be incredibly proactive with your prehab or your proactive rehab. So if you have injuries, if you have a tweaked shoulder, making sure you're getting that looked at once every week, once every 2 weeks. If you have a slightly dodgy knee, making sure your program is written around that. You're doing all that work. But definitely just being in good shape and being actually strong. Don't care about the weird stuff that you do on a medicine ball or kettlebell exercises or resistance band exercises. None of that matters as much as being actually strong.
Henry says, have you seen the 15-year-old that hit a 170 snatch on Instagram? I did. I actually shared it again. My problem with this, right, is how long he's obviously been taking gear for at least the last 2 or 3 years, which is unacceptable. It's fucking disgraceful. And we never take a hard sense in gear. You know, we don't care.
No,
it's
but a 12-year-old can't be taking gear.
Taking gear as a 12-year-old is terrible. Honestly, it's so reprehensible. You know, the morality of doping in sports is pretty nuanced, and it's not as cut and dry as we make it out to be. And we, you know, it's just part and parcel of doing what we do is being called. Some people dope and some people don't dope, and that's whatever it is. Just deal with the different factors. It's not for us to judge people. But a 15-year-old taking gear is disgusting because it's so unfair. He might think right now he loves weightlifting. He might be like, yeah, I love weightlifting. This is all I want to do for the rest of my life. And then by the time he's 18, he might be like, you know what, I don't even like weightlifting. He could get horribly injured in the next few weeks and next few months or like a year's time. And then his career is ruined and he's taking gear and he's got all of these issues, developmental issues from taking gear as a teenager and a very, very young teenager, early onset of puberty potentially. He might not even hit puberty by the time he took gear. He might not fully develop through puberty. His development of certain organs might be fucked up, joints, especially people don't talk about is like brain tissue and how that will be formed and how his personality might change in a direction that he might not have ever ended up on and taking gear that young. So giving him at that age, I don't care what your reason is, it's just not good. It's never that good. You know, the difference between a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old is massive. 12-year-olds are still children, right? So he definitely didn't start taking gear at the age of like 50. He didn't just take it yesterday and start at 50. He's obviously been taking that for at least, say, 2 years, you know? So we know a lot of weightlifters are taking gear very, very young, as like mid-teenagers. And even that, when you're more developed than you're not developed, is still a more positive than taking gear that young. So I think it's just terrible, honestly. And like we never talk about gear like that ever.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to note that it is not something we would ever be cool with. I think it's honestly disgusting, like, because it's so unfair in him. Because you're not a real person when you're that age, like you're a child.
Also, you're permanently altering his development.
And he could be
for
fine.
The rest. He could be absolutely
fine. Yeah.
But you have a very high likelihood of developmental alterations or stunting of development that will last him forever and will never be fixed. There's no pharmacological intervention that will make someone go through puberty for a second time or more effectively, or making sure they get the whole suite of development. Like your brain realistically doesn't finish developing until you're in your mid-20s for males. His brain is a decade off being fully developed right now. So he was probably a decade and a half, or he was 12, like realistically when he started.
At least 13, like, you know, because you know the issue as well with that is if you take gear when you're 25, you are basically fully formed. Like your developments are based on entirely on the environment around you and the actions you take. There's not endogenous processes that will start happening, like biological processes that would naturally happen with age. So for you, when you're formed, if you take gear, something bad happens, and if you were smart and corrected and you stop taking gear and you take the actions, you can revert back to life and get back to where you were in a positive position, potentially, or very close to that. Whereas, unfortunately, for younger athletes like that, when they take gear, is they potentially could be fine. With people like Sisman Kalecki, he reportedly tested positive when he was 14 and was swept under the rug. Now he's like fighting MMA. You know, he's obviously, we really don't even know. You can't even see the effects. You have no idea what the effects would be. But at that age, because you're formed using high levels of androgens, anabolics, performance-enhancing drugs, SARMs, who knows what he's using, his essentially baseline through puberty is through the use of those. So anything after that, as he gets older, if he's not using any performance-enhancing drugs, he's essentially deviating from what he developed with, you know. So it's very likely things won't be great for him. And I genuinely hate to see it so much, because grown adults taking gear, I'm all for it, whatever you want. Like, people should be allowed to do whatever they want. But for kids like that, I fucking hate it, because they're not.
Yeah.
You're not a real person. You're not developed. 12-year-old me wanted to be a fucking paleontologist. Kids, like, you know, it's honestly really.
The last thing I'd say on that is children in those positions are much more open to the instances of abuse. So like you're now reliant on a system because you're doped and you're being pushed in this direction. You're just so much more open to financial abuse, emotional, everything is being altered without your permission. And even if it did have your permission, you're in no way capable of making the decision. So, like, 170 snatches are cool.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's just.
But if you look at this from a development of an athlete, he doesn't need gear at 15. There's literally no reason for him to need gear at 15. He probably could snatch 130 at 15, or maybe even 140 without gear. Maybe, let's say 130 would be phenomenal at 15. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason he couldn't train till he is 17 and have done like 145, 175, and then give him gear if you want to give him gear, you know. And he would still make better. He could make the same or better progress, you know. They're just speeding up what they're trying to do to him, you know. And I really have no time for it. OL says, should you take pre-sleep protein even on rest days? No. The main thing about sleep is your body really likes routine. So whatever you consistently do, just keep doing that is the main thing.
If you're waking up in the middle of the night hungry, or you wake up in the morning like literally wrenching, you know, sometimes you wake up and you're like, holy shit, I need to eat food right now or I'm going to faint. Then you need to look at some pre-sleep food. To be honest, I keep people away from it unless they're having that kind of waking up in the middle of the night or very early in the morning needing food. Patrick Miller asks, how do you program for older lifters? I'm later 30s and having trouble on work days dealing with volume, fire to energy issues after everything. This is, I think we actually missed the question further up. So to Patrick's point, right, how you program for older athletes is obviously different, right? There's obviously certain changes you need to make or you could make. But when you're looking at weightlifting, there's a number of things that are stalwarts in the program, right? Your lifts, so the snatch and the clean and jerk, are above all else. They're the most important thing. You have to do a certain amount of them each week to get better. Next thing from there, you need some amount of squatting and some amount of strength work, whether that be pulling, pressing, rowing, whatever it is. You need to be strong to lift the weights. Then you have your accessory work, your core work, and your midline stability work. What I'd say for you, Patrick, is in your later 30s, it's not a different thing. You're still training the same thing. You have to monitor certain things a small bit more carefully, right? So when you're looking at the snatch and the clean and jerk, your volume, the overall weekly volume just might not be as high, right? So if you had on the snatch, if you were able to do 20 working sets between 80 and 90% per week, you mightn't be able to do those 20 working sets. It might now be 15, 16, 17 working sets, or it could be as low as 8, 9, or 10 working sets. That is still the priority. You still keep that in the same place, but you might just drop the overall volume slightly. In terms of strength work, you're probably going to have to do something slightly different. In late 30s, you're probably not going to have to make huge changes. But as you get later and later on, the changes are that. So if we take starting with high volume, going to low volume and high intensity, starting with low intensity, going to high intensity with low volume, that just takes place over a much longer period. So when we have younger athletes or athletes who are physiologically predisposed to adaptation right now, this can happen so quickly, you know, that changing, that alteration of volume and intensity. In an older athlete or an athlete who's struggling with recovery slightly, you just have to spend more time. You have to spend more time at high volume, low intensity. You have to spend more time at medium volume, medium intensity, spend more time at low volume and high intensity. So you just elongate the slope slightly. Overall, though, it is something that you have to monitor. So it's not like this thing of, an athlete mid-30s to mid-40s has to 70% of the volume mid-20s to mid-30s would do, or vice, whatever it is. You just need to say, okay, I prioritize my snatch and my clean and jerk. I know my strength numbers might be a bit slower, so the progressions mightn't be as aggressive from week to week, or I might just hang out. Instead of doing week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, I might do week 1, week 1, week 2, week 2, week 3, week 3, week 4, week 4, and a 4-week block becomes an 8-week block. That's a very normal thing to do. But to be honest, I would say in your mid to late 30s, it's not a huge change, but they're just small things you need to pay attention to.
The biggest thing I've noticed, and I have a good few older athletes, I don't know why I keep getting them. So the biggest thing, Patrick, I've noticed with masters athletes is people like to crumple paper when you're trying to talk. So I missed a bin twice in a row now. That's twice you've had.
No, I got one in after lunch. I missed one before.
Okay, 2 out of 3. It's terrible. So the biggest thing I've noticed about masters athletes is past sporting history makes the biggest difference. It literally changes how much the stuff Fitz is talking about. The biggest thing I've noticed that dictates what part of that they can do and how much is literally what their sporting history was and how long that they kept that up for. So I mentioned in the past, I have a 45-year-old athlete in Japan, and he did athletics in college at varsity level, and then he kept that up and he did masters athletics in his 30s, and now he's going to weight in his 40s, and he is such a different ball game from the other late 30s athletes I have who did not do a lot of sporting activity outside of their late teens when they finished up. It makes a huge difference. It really is a case of use it or lose it, and if you have not been using it, you will almost certainly have lost it. And if you never developed in the first place, it will take longer. Now, that's not to say, though, that those athletes who didn't use it cannot develop some talent and develop talent they have and get better weightlifting, because they have. From what I've seen, all of them are getting better. But it is just something to note that staying in condition is very, very important for those athletes, and staying active for their whole life. And by the time they get to weightlifting, it makes such a big difference. If you stop using things, it inevitably, you do lose it. So big thing I've noticed is the biggest thing, the difference really is their past activity levels was the main one. And then obviously all the stuff it's talking about, like some of them can handle loads of volume, some of them make great technique corrections, and then kind of, it varies in on the individual.
Someone's looking for a book suggestion. I'll leave this to Gar.
In terms of biochemistry, I think he corrected himself further down. So
okay.
He said, basically, when it comes to textbooks on biochemistry, the newest version of biochemistry books is what you always want to be getting. So in terms of if they're biochemistry for sport, for example, or if they're biochemistry in general, I would definitely recommend a general biochemistry book would do well. But the main thing you need to do with those is just get the latest version of them, the newest and most updated version, because it is relatively fast-changing fields in comparison to stuff like engineering or chemistry, for example. Biochemistry changes very, very frequently, and so if you're buying a version of a book, try to get the most up-to-date version you can possibly get. In terms of the textbooks, just honestly, most of them are pretty good, to be honest. The information is usually written by multiple different authors. There's usually 3 or 4 people writing them. The editors are on the ball. The editors are people who know exactly what they're editing. The editor very likely was a former academic in the field. Yeah. So when they go to, I think it's usually Fisher, or I think Penguin do a lot of science books as well, so biochemistry. So the editing is on point. So you can be very confident that the information presented is the best representation of the information of the field at the time. So main thing of biochemistry is either get a biochemistry book that's most up to date, or you can get biochemistry for sports, and they're all certainly worth involving yourself in if you have the time, and just reading through them, taking segments you think you might like the interest. Just the main thing is get the most up to date from them, because you do see that certain things will be out of date, and sometimes they'll be radically different. Now, it might only be 10% of the book might have changed in the last 10 years, but it's certainly a relevant 10%. So the main thing, any of the biochemistry textbooks you get on, just the most up-to-date version.
On the point of books and book recommendations in general, because people do ask us, particularly when we were doing a lot of paper reviews, people used to ask us about books a lot, because people want this, you want a plug-in where you just say, I'm going to read this and I'll know everything about biomechanics, or I'll know everything about biochemistry.
Yeah.
The amount that stuff changes is huge, right? So you could have a book that was written in the 80s that's now on its 12th edition or 13th edition, and the information is vastly different in it because the studies will have been updated. But one thing that won't change is if you take a fundamentals book, like if you take a third level physics book or a third level biochemistry or just chemistry book, those kind of fundamental principles won't change or won't alter too much. Also, if you do read one of those kind of fundamentals book, you'll be able to like go through the information in your biochemistry for sport book or your biomechanics of weightlifting book. You'll be able to go through that and absorb that an awful lot more effectively because you have a really good understanding of your foundations within it.
What are the biomechanics books like?
They're good. They're a biomechanics book that was just watered down physics and like yeah, I'd say if somebody was watching this now and they were getting involved in or getting interested in biomechanics and you didn't have a background in physics or applied maths or something like that, I would go immediately and look at like a second degree or a third degree physics book and read that first.
I would say the biomechanics papers and articles I read are difficult to read, as in the languages for the in crowd, the nuance, the terms. The assumption is that if you're reading biomechanics papers, it is that you have a very good basis of knowledge in biomechanics. It's highly technical. It is very physics-esque, which I've done physics and stuff, so it's fine. I've read a lot of biomechanics stuff so far, but it sounds like the books might be a better place to start for biomechanics.
Yeah,
if that's what you're looking for.
It's far more an engineering stroke physics field than it is a sports or a medical field. Like,
it's no coincidence that the biomechanists from the Soviet Union ended up working for the Soviet Space Agency.
Yeah,
it's no accident, you know.
And a lot of the biomechanists in universities will have had a maths degree or a physics degree. They won't have a sports degree.
And it's also known when there are loads of the Soviet biomechanics, it's still incredibly relevant because the body hasn't changed that much.
No. And the things you figure out with biochemistry and stuff, as your technology gets far, far better, right? Mm-hmm. As you're able to look into things, as you're able to test things with different assays, microscopes, you can obviously discover a hell of a lot more. To be honest, once they developed a very good force plate, you figured out a lot of your stuff in biomechanics, you know, and it's in terms of breaking it down. A good force plate and some 3D renderings will get you a long way.
Any thoughts on how to combine conditioning with strength in a single session? Only got time for one a day training realistically. So if this depends on what you're doing, Padraig. I've seen Padraig say him a lot before, but I can't remember. I don't know if he's a weightlifter. So if you are a field sports athlete, Padraig, then you will typically always strength first. So high skill, lower fatigue movements come first. Fine motor pattern ones always go first in a session, and then absolute strength stuff comes first, and then our conditioning will come after. But if you are not primarily a field sport athlete as conditioning is a huge priority, I would recommend getting your conditioning in through kind of higher activity neat levels outside the day. So going for a 10-minute walk in the morning and like a 15-minute walk after lunch, and then a 15-minute walk again in the evening, as opposed to multiple split sessions. However, if you are I suppose a real athlete to be termed, if we haven't used that term in a while, I think people get offended because they don't know. We're just talking non-strength sport athletes. So start with your strength stuff always first, and then work your way down into the conditioning.
Yeah, I think the difference here is what level of conditioning do you need to get to?
Yes.
If it's conditioning for either of us, right? Yeah. You're like, I don't want to have a heart attack when I'm in my 40s, and I want to be able to walk up and down stairs and recover well in between sets. Your level of conditioning is never huge, right? If you're playing a field sport and you're on the pitch for 80 or 90 minutes and you're sprinting and stopping, doing a lot of like low level work as well as high level work, your conditioning is just so much more complicated and there's so much more volume involved.
You need separate training sessions.
Yeah.
You need to just do that once, pick that day and make it the strength day or your conditioning day. Look, you can't fit both of those in. That's quality over quantity there in terms of that. Really.
And on that project, like say if you're really time constrained, right? If let's just put it down whereby you're barely able to do this, and you have 2 sessions a week where you need to do some strength and some conditioning. Do some strength in one session and some conditioning in the other session, and it'll be far better than doing like a fucking high intensity activity thermogenesis session where you're doing fucking strength training and conditioning all at the same time.
Wait a bunch, is like.
Yeah.
Erica says, Garth looking sharp. Thank you so much, Erica. I appreciate that.
He is. It's a lovely shirt.
It's a great shirt.
Yeah.
I don't know what brand it is though. We should want the secret shirts at some point.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Um,
Black shirt with white logo.
no, do you know the white shirt that people wear in offices where they're almost see-through and you can see the vest underneath and they have to be tucked in?
Good day, lads. What's your position on male athletes doing hand hards to improve performance? I think, if anything, they negatively stunt your performance forever.
Do you like garage? I'd never heard of garage strength until he commented on one of our videos and we thought he was throwing shade, but
I thought he was throwing shade too.
I don't think he was. I think
no, he wasn't. He wasn't. He was just saying.
Yeah.
But so I've actually, honestly, I've never watched any of his videos. I know of him. I clicked in the video he made about alien because people were telling me there's a lot of drama in the comments, and I love drama in comments, so I went and had a look. But I honestly, we don't watch the fitness YouTubers I watch, right? Seb, Zach, Ivan, and Juji Mufu. They're the four I watch, and then 80% of my other videos are about people murdering or like maths problems.
Like, weird abstract topics
space,
or QI,
astronomy, geopolitics,
long range rifle shooting.
They're great. But no, I don't remember. I've literally never watched a full garage strength video. To be honest, a lot of that's on purpose too. We don't want to watch other people do stuff because you want to remain untarnished, as it were, wholly unique, as it is.
Unpopped.
Yeah.
In terms of cherries.
Undoped.
We're talking about different pops. Okay.
We're back. Okay, just give us 2 seconds, gents. And we'll be back in action. Let's just got a phone call there. Why did you walk so far away?
We're back.
Okay, so Abdel Kadiktis, right?
Yeah.
Right. Hi guys, I'm fairly new to weightlifting, less than a year, with a strength background. Stagnating at 80, 110, back squat around 180, 85. What should focus more on? Just do more weightlifting. You just got to do weightlifting. Just correct weightlifting programming, fixing your technique. Is it mobility issues? Correct your mobility issues if you have mobility issues. But just do weightlifting. You don't need to focus on any part of weightlifting in particular. Just do your weightlifting training. Do the things you're bad at for sure. Like if you are a bad snatch technique or you're weak overhead, then just do those. Just do weightlifting. It's a very common question. The answer is very simple, but it's not easy. You need knowledge and experience and someone to help you with it. But just doing weightlifting, honestly, is the place to start.
It'd be very different if you were saying stagnating at 80, 110, my back squat's 100 kilos. That's a different kettle of fish altogether, but you just need to do more, just as Garth was saying. Okay, OL says, how can I maintain focus on short-term goals and not long-term goals? I find myself focusing on long-term goals, which are obviously far away at the moment, and makes me nervous about my Ollie career. Okay, this is where the misnomer with goal setting comes up, right? So say you're saying Ollie career, so you want 140, 175, snatch and clean and jerk, right? They're long-term goals. They're 5 years away. At the moment, you're doing 92.5. I'm just making up numbers for you now, right? Oh, well, if you want to correct these in real time too, right? At the moment, you're snatching 92.5 and you're clean and jerking 117.5. The long-term goal is 140, 175, and now you're saying you keep focusing on that and not paying attention to medium-term goals, right? You probably have 20 distinct goals in between 140, 175, but it could be closer to 50, right? So the first thing you have to do is you have to snatch more than 92.5 kilos and you have to clean and jerk more than 117.5 kilos. You also then have this concurrent path where not only is your snatch and clean and jerk going up, so you have snatch, triples, doubles, and singles to be setting goals for. You have clean and jerk, singles, doubles, triples, 1+2, 1+3, 1+4. All of these things are separate goals you can be setting for 3 months away, 4 months away, 5 months away. That's just in the snatch and clean and jerk. So that's in your weightlifting column. Your strength training column, you front squat, 1 RM, 2 RM, 3 RM, back squat, 1s, 3s, 5s, 8s. All of these are separate goals that will run concurrently to your weightlifting. Then you have your tertiary goals, which might be like be a better athlete goal. That might be, not missing a session for 2 weeks. That might be not missing a session for 2 months. That might be not missing a session for 2 years. All of these goals go into that one silo of 140, what do we say, 140, 175 at the end. And they're all leading into this. So when you say you keep missing out on short-term goals, because you say you were supposed to do 85 kilos for a double and you keep missing out on that, you keep missing reps, or you're fucking up because you're not paying enough attention to your doubles, you keep thinking about this one here, you can never get past this silo which leads you in here. What you need to do is you need to get a sheet of paper and you need to say, okay, 3 months away, 9 months away, and a year, 12 months, you could even do 6 months in between. And then you can divide those 3 or 4 columns up into weightlifting goals. And like, you can do weightlifting goals, but do them for derivatives of the lift as well, where it's power snatches, hang snatches, strength goals, and then tertiary. And then you write out this very comprehensive list of, I need X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, and you just go down and you tick those off like a ladder. You can't, like, at the moment you're just kind of not seeing the forest for the trees, or not seeing the wood for the trees, because you just, everything is so clouded over. You need to set it out like a roadmap rather than thinking about all these goals just floating around. The goals are set up like a ladder. So you start and you just gradually tip along. It's no harm to look up at the top goal every so often, but it's so important you just keep ticking those other small ones off the list.
Hey guys, any experience with tendinopathy and how would you deal with it? So I have experienced tendinopathy for sure. I had in my thumb before. The experience of tendinopathy, though, in general, is that it's wholly unique to what body part and what tendon is experiencing tendinopathy. So the fix for the tendinopathy will be vastly different depending on where you're getting it. So can't really give you any advice, because the treatments for quad tendinopathy would be so much different than tendinopathy in your mid-back, for example, or something like that, you know. So nothing we can really help you with there.
What I would say as well, Daryl, is it's very, very, very likely you have tendonitis and not tendinopathy. So tendinopathy is where you have degradation of the muscle fibers that cannot be fixed. What's that? Of the fibers within your tendon. You have holes in those. You'll see it on an MRI. It's a long-term thing. It goes on for a very, very long time. It takes a huge amount of time to fix it. It's very likely what you're experiencing, if it's been less than like a year, it's very likely that's tendonitis you're experiencing, and your treatment for tendonitis is separate from your treatment of tendinopathy. So it's important that you go to an actual healthcare professional and get this looked at.
Yeah.
Or else you slide down into tendinopathy and away from tendonitis.
And there is things out there that can help you with tendinopathy. Not going to tell you what they are, but they're not banned by WADA. And some people talk about them sometimes in their YouTubes, and supposedly they work really well. So how are the spider shoes holding up? Yeah, other than the fact that they're covered in dirt and grease, because I train in a mechanics shed. And they're funny, it really annoys people. Dirt really annoys some people, and it really is funny.
In your videos?
Yeah, it always annoys people. Someone will always make a comment, you know, if the shed's a little bit dirty, or when I was training in the garage below, you know, someone will always make a comment, why don't you just clean up the place?
Yeah.
Lads, it's none of your fucking business.
No, that's not the important thing.
No, but they're very dirty. I want to clean them, I'll give it a little scrub, but in terms of holding up, they seem as good as new. They're still perfect, still tight, they haven't loosened up. Still good quality, to be honest with you. What's that now, 3 months maybe?
One of my athletes got them after Gerf getting them. Arnold.
Oh, yeah.
So he got them, but what he was finding was the toe box was really tight in them, so it was actually hurting his feet.
Yeah.
And he was asking me if I had any suggestions. I told him heat them up in warm water and then wear the shoes. And he hasn't had an issue since.
You dropped them, obviously, because he's complaining about tight shoes.
Oh, yeah, obviously. I don't talk to him anymore.
Assuming one trains the clean, jerk, and snatch in a sort of balanced way, what does having the clean be proportionally the weakest of the three safe for an athlete? So this could be anything from being incredibly weak to having very poor understanding of the clean, So two things you need to understand. One, the main thing you need to understand, basically, about the snatch and the clean is they are radically different lifts. And I think this is the biggest issue. A lot of times people think about it the same, but they're so vastly different. There's so much, the way you think about them, how you approach them, the speed, the tempo, barbell height, what you think about are so different in the clean. Too often people overpull the clean. The biggest thing we see in most people is people overpull the clean. They bend their arms to roll the clean into their hip. So if you get stronger legs, and start thinking about getting under the barbell as fast as possible, that's a good place to start with clean. But of course, without seeing your lifts, VK couldn't possibly give you a concrete recommendation. But we will be doing our August review of subscribers, of course. So
Yeah.
we will, if you want to get your lifts in, then for sure. Just going to interrupt this broadcast for a minute. We've been assured that the combat sport program will be up this evening or tonight. So we will put up a post to let you know.
Okay. Where are we? Beginning weightlifting. So this is Eureka Vey. Says beginning weightlifting, how often accessory and strength work? It really depends how often you need accessory and strength work. If you were on one of our programs, you'd be doing strength work every day you trained, and you do accessory work at least 2 days a week. But it really, I've got athletes who do accessory work 7 times a week. I've athletes who do accessory work 3 to 4 times a week. So it really does depend on what you need.
That just will be some kind of biological attachment.
Yeah.
Like so.
Yeah.
Which is gone anyway. Yeah. I think we'll be back to people chance. I think.
Are we back?
Are we back?
Yeah.
Let's just use my phone.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have Wi-Fi next week. Okay. Boss Luke says, personally, I think different federations in powerlifting, stupid in the first place, especially the arguments for having a different bar for each. Love the simplicity of weightlifting. Absolutely. I'd hate if weightlifting in a load of different federations. I wish it wasn't the IWF was the federation, because it's full of cowboys like. But yeah, I hate the fact that there's 20 world record holders that all weigh 90 kilos and that all squat different weights. Like, that's not a world record. Like, that's just your buddies, you know.
We might start taking a few questions in a minute. But there's still loads of good questions, though, but unfortunately. So there's a few I want to get to, so we'll pick up videos separately. What do you guys think about acute injuries in weightlifting? Are they generally avoidable with good technique? Excuse me, I'm going to work. Or does it come down to bad luck, asking like a Brooke Wells situation? So if you are pushing the limits in weightlifting and trying to achieve new PRs, in theory, avoiding injuries is certainly possible, but in reality, so you will never not get injured, unfortunately. If you're trying to push your limits all the time and train hard, you will almost certainly get injured. You won't be able to cover all your bases. Eventually, you will just get injured. It's unavoidable. In terms of acute injuries like that, they are certainly avoidable with good technique, training with proper load management, doing what you need to do, warming up correctly, doing your appropriate mobility. I'm kind of talking more about obtuse injuries, so kind of things that would take long-term insidious injuries from Biomechanics or whatever the current literature suggests causes injuries, whatever, So injuries are unavoidable. Acute injuries like that are certainly avoidable. And if we're talking about Brooke Wells kind of injury, that was very poor programming on the part of.
That's the competition.
That's competition fault. You should be doing a max snatch after 12. After 12 events in CrossFit, it's wholly unacceptable. I think it's indefensible. You could argue Brooke obviously had an injury already in her elbow, so it's just something she should have been aware of. But no one ever knows if they're going to discredit their elbow doing a snatch. So I would say injuries are unavoidable, but those kind of injuries are certainly avoidable through smart training, good technique, and appropriate assistance work.
Somebody asked in a YouTube comment on the snatch video about about Brooke Wells, and they were asking about shoulder positions overhead, and then there was just a bit of a mix-up, right? So they were saying, is it because of how CrossFit teaches the snatch? So obviously CrossFit teaches the snatch with an externally rotated shoulder, right? So that's elbow pointed towards the ground, palm of the elbow pointed up to the ceiling. And they're saying that's why, because you'll see certain lifters who do a lot of seminars will say they would like to internally rotate their shoulders, even though nobody can internally rotate their shoulders unless they take their arm off and put their arm or their hand off and put their hand on the other way around. It's not possible. You can certainly have a more neutral shoulder position where that flex point at the elbow points more forward, but you can't point it down, right? So they're talking about internally rotating their shoulders. In terms of where the risk lies, biomechanically with the barbell overhead, there's less risk when the shoulder's externally rotated because downward force would cause flexion, and flexion is perfect for the elbow. It's any sort of non-flexion force going into the elbow causes issues. So I would actually say that the way the CrossFit teaches it, where it's elbows down, palms at the elbow pointed up, is less dangerous than this kind of position. Because if somebody hits me with a hammer here now, right, and tries to break my elbow, you'll break my elbow. If you hit me with a hammer here, it won't break the elbow at all. So I think Brooke was a combination of unlucky, and it was terrible program by the people who write the CrossFit Games programming. So I hope she recovers well.
Okay, so we'll keep on questions. So 2020 Worlds happen this year. It's very, very likely they will happen, I'd say. That'll be 2 years without a Worlds, which is not something anyone wants. And there's a lot of people with a point to prove probably later this year. So I'd say we'll see them. The date, according to the IWF website, the date is in November, but they haven't picked it yet. Maybe if it's close by, we might go to it.
Yeah.
And Stagnating, absolutely not. No fucking
Jesus,
way.
no. Seb is dirty.
Couldn't possibly.
Yeah.
So the 6 strength to a GA strength hypertrophy style program. Not yet, not specific to GA.
But all the GA players run our off-season strength and hypertrophy program.
Yeah.
That's what it is. If there was a GA program, it would be that program that's called the GA one. GA players need the same thing, that like it's some hybrid of a soccer player and a rugby player. So that program exists. We've probably had more than 100 GA players run that program for 2 to 3 months. So go get it. Off-season strength and hypertrophy.
I did want to know, Chit and Balam, that sounded wrong. Want to ask you about Lasha. I think we're wrong about his strategy. It can't be just about money. What do you think he's make great compared to other great lifts, even next to Lou? Lasha is unreal. I think it's just part of his approach, his personality. Never overreach, be secure in your training, because the lift is never in doubt. I think underestimate the psychology and physiology of strain, of missing, physiology, psychology, strain of missing lifts. We always talk about this, about the psychology of failing a lift. I think this is exactly what Lash's strategy is about money, without a shadow of a doubt. So obviously, Lash has never come out and said that he gets money for breaking records, but this is the commonality among athletes the world over, Olympics or not, in international sports. If you break world records, you get a payout. In weightlifting for Lasha, he does not look like he's slowing down anytime soon by the looks of this Olympics. So you don't have a very long career in relation to the rest of your life. It's very hard to transition from being an elite athlete to a non-supported action, I suppose, self-funded, making your own way through the world when it's not a government-funded, after you become an elite, after you finish being an elite athlete. So for Lash's point of view, it only makes sense for him because he's 2 kids and he's a wife, his family, and of course he wants to be able to live comfortably after lifting. So it only makes the most sense for him to continually earning money in the easiest way possible for the longest way possible. I know we like to be like, oh, 500, will that happen? Oh, Lash should do the 267, be the GOAT. And I'm sure Lasha wants that too. But Lasha also needs to think about what's financially viable for him as an individual and doing that in the easiest, most consistent, and the longest way possible. It's almost certainly, I'd put a lot of money on it in this terms of, is it mostly about money? Absolutely. It only makes sense for him to just break the record bit by bit. And as long as he breaks a record every year and he gets more money, that's all that matters to him. Yeah. It only makes sense for him to break records by smaller amounts.
I have 2 points in this. The first point, when you're saying, like, I think it's part of his approach, his personality, never overeats, to be secure in training, right? Lasha has snatched more weight than anybody else. Like, these are the heaviest weights that are being lifted, right? To say that person doesn't push his limits or doesn't push past or doesn't overreach in training, I guarantee you Lasha is pushing his limits when he's snatching 230 in training. I guarantee you he's pushing his limits when he's doing all of his other work, right? It just looks like he's not pushing his limits to us because we're on the outside looking in. You can't say one of the strongest humans to ever live doesn't overreach in training or doesn't push his limits or just wants to be secure with every lift, I guarantee you Lasha has that feeling that we all would have of, Jesus, I hope I'm going to make this. He has to. There's no way possible that the person lifting the most weights in the world ever has not got that feeling in his head. In terms of the psychology of missing a lift, Garth hasn't missed a lift. When was the last time you missed an actual rep? Genuinely.
Not this year, anyway.
Okay, so Garth hasn't missed a lift in 8 months, right? And it's probably a lot longer than that. Not missing lifts is a phenomenal sign of a lifter. We also have no idea. Lasha could be missing lifts every single day in training.
Yeah.
Lasha could have reefed on 240 snatches for the last 4 months. Nobody'd ever know because nobody'd ever say, because nobody's ever allowed to video it. We have no idea. Now, if you're that guy sitting on the bench in the back of Lasha's video, or you're Dr. Georgie, and you say, okay, I see all of Lasha's training, then we can start saying like, oh, I think it's his personality. He doesn't like missing lifts and he doesn't want to fail a lifting competition. Then you can start saying that, but we have no idea. Like we're running off an Instagram page, we're running off his physio's Instagram page, and 1 or 2 other videos from competitions and stuff. That's literally all we know about his training. Then the second thing about missing lifts is me missing a snatch at 110 or 120 kilos is not risky, right? The biggest risk is going to do is I might tweak my wrist, I might hurt my shoulder, I might drop the bar awkwardly, and there'll be some risk in that, right? Lasha is snatching more weight than most of us squat. He's snatching weights that are very, very fast, and he's also holding them at a really high position when he recovers. The risk for Lasha, not only is there a huge risk of injury because the weights are so large, there's a huge risk because it's so financially viable for him not to get injured. So why would you kill the cash cow if the cash cow keeps on bringing in more money? There's absolutely no way you do.
So one thing as well about missing lifts is that, we talk about this, but people opening too heavy and getting more attempts at then heavier weights is just so stupid.
Yeah.
Think about it this way, right? If you miss a lift, do you think the probability of you making your next lift has gone up or gone down? Of course, everyone would agree. In most scenarios, your probability of making that next lift has been reduced. Might be a very, very small amount, but you missing that lift certainly has not increased the probability. There is no scenario where that has increased it, other than a very, very small chance where we might get a psychological aggression, and most chances that's not useful. No. In most base scenario, if you miss a lift, your chance of missing the next lift has just gone up. So you're less likely to make that next lift. So for this is kind of aside from Lasha, but you asked about the kind of psychological or physiological demands of missing lift, you're essentially polluting your central nervous system in a pattern that you don't want happening. You're reinforcing something you do not want to happen. There is zero benefits to missing lifts ever. No matter what anyone tells me, there is no benefits to missing a lift. So missing a lift only makes the probability of you making that next lift go down. So essentially, Lasha not missing is very, very important for him, as with all other lifters. That's not really related to Lasha's long-term strategy, but it is related to everyone that's listening.
Okay, one thing here, and it's on the shoulder wrist position, right? Red Liquor Christ says the superior position in the bench is internal rotation of the shoulder, bent wrist, maximum bench width, and maximal bridge. Right.
That's
so. Is that?
You're joking, Darren.
Okay.
Come on, like that's obviously a joking. Like.
Okay.
That was a joke to the reference to earlier when you said about the limp wrist.
Right.
Obviously, he's joking.
I hope so.
You guys do any cardio at all weightlifting? I do so much fucking cardio.
Every weightlifter should be doing cardio.
I'd say on my off days I'll do like an hour of cardio, and on my on days I'll do about 40 minutes of cardio. And it's all talking pace cardio, so I can still talk doing it. So it's probably like 100 beats per minute, maybe 110 beats per minute, maybe like 110 at the last few minutes. But I do shit on the cardio. And Tom, we have a load of videos on our channel about knee wraps and knee sleeves and wrist wraps. Just
search them on the channel. Thoughts on Greg Everett's Ultimate Weightlifting Guide? Have you read it? It's the worst. It's the worst book on weightlifting. Probably the worst book in sport I've ever read.
I've held the book in my hand and I didn't want to read it. Okay, let's start.
Is the Italian weightlifting team clean?
Who asked that? Who asked, lads? Who's the
Dude,
funny man? Who's funny man?
Gunnar Kramer.
Lashes Ranger. No.
Gunnar, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck.
No, what is that one?
Opinion on electrostim for recovery.
No question, but loving all the live streams daily. But I do stand by my mushroom opinion there. Banned Trevor and that. I think you agree with me, so I won't get you banned, Scott.
Where is that?
Scott's just saying your opinion on mushrooms is wrong, and I agree with him. Someday we're going to do the rickshaw run in India. We're going to race across India in a rickshaw, but that won't be for a few years now at this rate. Okay, here's a good question. Anthony, sorry, I didn't cut you off there. So what's a reasonable acceptable rest interval between a hard set of squat? 10 reps at 75 to 80%. So
10 reps at 80% is outrageous.
What would that be for? I'm just going to think that is.
That's 180%.
Yeah. No, that's not that much. I can do that. But, yeah.
Yeah, but you're also really well disposed to high rep squat.
What would that be for you? What would that be for you, Kate? What's your max directly? Times 0.8. You should definitely do 180%.
Yeah, I've done 180%.
Rest time for multiple sets of those. So first strength training, the main thing you always need to worry about in terms of resting is that you return to normal. So outside of a work capacity area or a high volume session where the idea is to build up enough work capacity and do a lot of work in a short time period, first strength training, the most amount of rest that you need to get back into shape to do the next set is what dictates how long you should be resting, unless it's a specified period of training where less rest is the goal to elicit some other kind of biological, physiological response. So if you've got 3 by 10 at 80%, and it takes you half an hour to do that, that is A-okay in most scenarios. It shouldn't take you that long to do that. But if that's what it takes you right now, then that is okay. If it takes you outside of, if you're not recovered within like a minute and a half, you're probably out of condition, and I would definitely be looking at getting your condition up and getting into better shape to make you a better lifter. But if that's the case and you need longer, then take longer. So quality over quantity in terms of like reducing that frequency in strength training, absolute strengths, as long as you possibly need. I've taken at least a really heavy set of 5x4 5 at like 2:30s and before, taking like an hour to do them.
Yeah.
That's just because I did it because it wasn't because I wasn't recovered. It's because
okay, there's a few good questions in the cluster here. There's 2 rugby ones, which we might answer. Any tips on strength and conditioning split for return to rugby after 2 years out and being 20 kilos overweight? Should I focus on strength or dropping weight? This is a tough one, right? Your training you're going to do when you're dropping, if you're trying to drop 20 kilos, is not training you want to be doing for playing rugby. It's not. Like, you're talking about just getting work capacity up really high so you burn extra calories. You want to get your NEAT up extra high, so non-exercise activity thermogenesis. Those walks Gerf talks about, doing extra cardio in the morning, extra cardio in the evening. All of these things are going to be terrible for you if you're trying to get stronger, faster, more powerful. But being at a healthy body weight is probably the most important thing out of all of them, right? So you need to prioritize that, allow that to happen. What you need to really look at then is not losing too much muscle tissue if you're dropping 20 kilos. So if you're 120 kilos, you want to get down to 100, the last thing you want to do is just strip diet, loads of exercise, no food at all. You lose a load of muscle tissue, and then you'll be in a terrible position going into a rugby season, particularly if you've taken 2 years off. So what you'd look to do is loads of hypertrophy work as much as you can handle. You're not going to be able to get good 1RM increases because you're dropping so much weight, or it'll be very difficult to do that. So what I would say is, like, maintain as much muscle tissue as possible, drop down to a good body composition, and then look to do like proper training for rugby afterwards.
Hi guys, this is if you don't, but I'm a 5'8" Macedonian with hopes to one day be an Olympic thrower. What sort of stuff should I be doing in the weight room to increase power for throwing? RIP Black Tom Cruise or Bitcoin? Black Tom Cruise.
What is the who's
Rug Muncher?
Rug muncher.
You made me say
near
it.
the bottom.
You made me say rug muncher.
I can't see that. But anyway, I wonder what age rug muncher is.
Younger, I'd say.
What I would look at doing is getting a gigantic back squat, a heavy pull. So at the moment, you're looking to get to like double body weight back squat, 2.5 times body weight deadlift. Then you can look at, and you can start developing this at the same time. But then you look at developing your power cleans and your hang power cleans and your push presses and your jerk. But what you really want, rug muncher, is you want rug muncher. What you really want is those big squat, big deadlift, and then you can do all the power stuff afterwards. But they're the main things you need. Like if you're 18 years old now and you're 100 kilos, you want the 200 kilo back squat, you want the 250 kilo deadlift. That's what you want for your throwing.
Fucking monster. Like an extra bold weightlifters, like 195. The squatting actually 20. So another one there. Oh, Homer says, just saying, hey, love these live Q&As. Keep it up, lads. Thanks, Homer. Appreciate that. Simon Reed says, in powerlifting, what is your opinion on accommodating resistance with bands or change? I think it'd be great for strength curves and good for healthy bar class. Do you use this with your athletes? Never. No, absolutely never. So there's probably a couple of reasons why we wouldn't use bands and chains in training. One of them I'd argue it's not good for bar class, and there's kind of the term of, so we're big on a lot of volume, work capacity stuff for powerlifters for in their strength training, that they are spend too much time being too specific. However, when we're looking at our specific movements in terms of our squat, bench, and deadlift, we mostly want to keep these exclusively to what we want them to be in competition, and then everything else can just be as varied as possible. So our assistance stuff, for example, can be as varied and as wide as possible as you want it to be. But when we were looking at our main movements, our sport-specific movements, we don't ever want to change these. And this will go for the same with weightlifting, but it's the same for squat, bench, and deadlift. So we don't ever want to be changing these. We want to keep these as consistent as possible, as repeatable as possible. So that's one of the main reasons we wouldn't use them. One of the other reasons is it's very hard to progress using bands and chains. So we're big fans of block progression. So I want to talk about linear progression later in a different video, but we won't talk about it now. But essentially, most of our training principles work around the idea of block progression. And one of those things is, and it's a main issue most people have in their training, we see with loads of powerlifters, loads of amateur powerlifters, loads of amateur strength training athletes, is they have no direction and they're not progressing to somewhere. So we do loads of consultation calls with people. People just call us up. You can see on the website, call us up for an hour for a conversation, talk about the programming. And you see it everywhere online as well, is loads of people just don't have a plan and a destination. They're never moving through different bands of stuff. So we'll always see people talk about, I've been doing 5x5 for the last 6 months and I'm stuck on 75 kilos or something like that. And what do I do now? Should I do like more sets of 5 or do I take more trend? So that's not what you want to be doing. You want to be moving through places and reliably progressing with something. And so when we use bands and chains, is we're not really sure what weight we're using. I know you can weigh the chains, but it's different at every degree above the ground we get. So they're not very repeatable. They're very hard to progress with. I know you can use the same bands and chains, but you can also just add more weight and change sets and reps, which are much more reliable. Also, there's an issue with them being, how much time do you really have in your training? How often can you really put them into your training when you could be doing something a lot more productive that would get you a lot better? You could do low bar bands or chain squats, or you could just do more sets of high bar squats and get a lot more bang for your buck and get a lot more transfer over. I'm not saying there's going to be negative transfer over. Maybe if they work for you, that's all great. No problem with that. We don't really care. We don't use them personally. I'm not going to try to take people down who are using them, but they just aren't the most useful thing you can do. Also, with bands, if you're using them on things like squats and benching in particular, actually deadlifting too, you could be looking at compromised positions, and we could be looking at putting more pressure on our joints in less ideal positions when we don't want to be doing. So I would say for those reasons, I'm out. What's that from? Is that Dragon's Den?
Dragon's Den, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a few like housekeeping questions that we can answer pretty quickly. Does your back squat program utilize linear or undulating periodization? Of course, it uses linear periodization because undulating periodization is a myth.
Well, it actually uses periodization, right?
Yeah.
So the common misconception that block periodization is always linear, but the idea that there is a slight cyclical effect to periodization. Is something that's been around for the last 50, 60 years. And most people don't. So the general direction is always linear, but there is cyclical feedbacks in our cyclical kind of drops a little bit, but it is built in. But it's in the general direction would be linear, I suppose. But there is some nuance to the use of those words.
Okay. Fraser Rankin says, I'm stuck with my squat. My quads are small. Could I build mass with a leg press, hack squat, then transition back? No. If you want a bigger, if you want a bigger leg press, just go and use the leg press. But if you want a bigger squat and you've identified the weakness as being tiny legs, which my weakness was all back and hamstrings and arse and no legs, you need to alter your squatting to make that part of your squat stronger, right? For me, what I did was started squatting up more upright. So I just brought the bar back down on my back a small bit lower. Started squatting more upright. I was doing squats to parallel and keeping my knees forward on the way down and forward on the way back up. I still practice that to this day. Then when I went back full depth squats, there's absolutely no issue. You need to make your quads strong by doing squats, but by doing squats effectively. And then when you go back to whatever style of squat you want, you'll have stronger quads. The problem is you might build some mass in your quads when you're doing a hack squat or a leg press. You're not really building strength that's transferable. Like in a leg press particularly, or in a hack squat actually, when you're pressing with your legs, like you're in a fully rounded over position. So you're 45 degrees. The legs are never going to lock out, so you're standing fully upright. So what you have is you have a hip flexor unit that's in flexion. You also have like the top of your quads aren't ever engaging fully because they're just kind of pushing away from you in a 45-degree angle. So it's not as transferable a skill. You're better to actually build your squat by using a squat, just squatting with better technique or a more applicable technique to what you're trying to do. Squats.
Will you answer?
I'll answer whatever you want.
Golden question there. Sorry, Michael
Golden's a good one.
We're doing great. Thanks for saying that. So if you get golden in volleyball in there.
Oh yeah, Golden says, I know you mentioned in a previous stream volleyball players should have a double bodyweight squat. Is it viable to run the off season and squat blocks together, or just one? Just run the off season one. Particularly if you're not training your squat like super aggressively, you don't need the intensive work that the squat program needs. Any squat will get you better at squatting, or any amount of partially intelligent programming will get you there, right? So run the off-season block, it'll get you much better, fully rounded. Now, if you're in the case where you've been squatting for a number of years, you're really stagnated on your squat, you can't progress, you've been doing other training and it hasn't worked, then don't run the off-season block. You just run the squat program. You could, by all means, buy both and take the squats out of the off-season block and run your squat program instead. But in my opinion, you just need one, and I think the off-season block is going to fit you a small bit better.
Okay, I think. Oh, actually, Michael P is a good question. A little bit out of our wheelhouse, but not out of our wheelhouse. Something we usually talk about. That's probably a better way of phrasing that. So he's wondering, how does one figure out if hypertrophy blocks are effective?
I love this.
If your weight stays similar and don't have access to advanced body scanning equipment.
I love this.
So what you'll have to use, right, is you'll have to assume results from increasing in weight on the same exercises. Probably the best way to go about this. So you can also use the mirror if you look better. That's probably one of the prime goals of that. So if you're looking for hypertrophy in terms of for using for sport, then it's a different scenario. If you're using hypertrophy for aesthetics, you can just simply use the mirror. If you start looking better, that's a good place to start. But if you keep your technique consistent, the exercise selection the same, if you can progress weight with similar reps as you started with, or if you can get back to a place in 6 weeks' time, if you start with bench press 4x10 and 100 kilos, and you return in 6 weeks' time back to bench press, but you can do 105 by 4x10 kilos, there's an implied result from that is very, very likely that you are or will gain muscle mass from the increased load for the same sets and reps at a higher volume. What are you going to say?
I was going to say, so obviously hypertrophy is a huge thing for off-season athletes. So it's something we deal with all the time. And because their weight might be going up and down with like water loading or what phase of training they're in, weight isn't always the best, but you can get a seamstress's measuring tape, the kind of yellow cloth, rubbery measuring tape. You can get that for like €2 in a pound shop, and you do like bony process here, bony process on your elbow, mark the halfway point, and you get a circumference here. You can do both arms, do the exact same on your quad, bony process on your hip, bony process on your knee, halfway point, get a circumference, and you do those measurements every week and write them down. You will see very soon if you're getting jacked or not.
You finished the Munir's question, remember that? You've got to go.
Munir.
MUINR, second to the bottom.
Oh, yeah. Okay, what are some basic strength exercises for sprinters? What would you recommend? To sound like a broken record again, you need a heavy squat and a relatively heavy deadlift. So you need to be getting towards, in your case, right? A great place to start is, what would the UKSCA say? So the UK, the United Kingdom Strength and Conditioning Association, probably the highest held in terms of their accreditation of coaches worldwide, right? What they would say, for you to be doing plyometric exercises, which most of your sprinting and your power work will be classed as plyometrics, for you to do that training, they want you minimum with a 1.5 times body weight squat. Ideally, they want you with a twice body weight squat. Right? So the first thing you want is good squat numbers, good deadlift numbers. The next thing you look at then is, what does my sprinting look like, and how do I need to alter my physiology to change my sprinting? So a really good example is sprinter who sprints quite well. Their sprinting stride is good. Their technique is good. They're not deviated, so they don't have feet going out to the side a lot. They're pretty efficient, but they're slow out of the blocks. In that case, you need an athlete with more power production. So that's things like power cleans. That's things like fast, heavy squats, clean pulls from the rack, snatch high pulls from the rack. All of these things that are powerful, both bilateral and unilateral movements, right? So single leg training and double leg training. If you're an athlete who gets out of the blocks really fast but tends to lose their position, so as they get to the midway point, as they're fully upright, then they slow down a lot and they might get that caving forward of their posture, then you need to look at some muscular endurance work around your midline. So once you hit the prerequisites, and the prerequisites we talked about are like being strong enough, being like having good posture, making sure your midline is strong. Once you do all of that and you maintain all of that, then you do, where does my sprinting, where does my sport specific work break down? And that's then what I'll add into my program.
Okay. Goodbye. Thanks for loads of great questions. I can't get to, but we've got to go. Really appreciate everyone tuning in. Really appreciate all the questions. All the questions are great. Really help with everything. You know, when we make videos from these, I'm still working on 2 live streams go with videos. So really appreciate all of these. Seems like a lot of people get a lot of stuff out of them due to the line number tuning in. So that's great. And people saying it to us. So thanks, John. It is a nice shirt. It's one of my favorite shirts. We'll see you later. See you
Next
later for a training vlog. And then tomorrow for a judo Ono Shoshi, the Japanese judo. His strength and conditioning is, I have some harm, but it's unbelievable. It's the best S&C I've ever seen in any athlete.
It's so good.
It's the best S&C.
It is so good.
So we'll see you for that for tomorrow. That video will be up tomorrow evening. I'll see you for a training vlog later today. If anyone likes watching those.
Thanks, guys.
Anyone likes watching those?
And girls.
Yeah.